Well, hey guys, thanks, good morning. So I know it's a little early, but so I think today I just wanted to take a little time out, and instead of kind of going back and rehashing my story as such, which I think probably some of you have heard or read, I think, and that was a nice introduction there, but I think I wanted to focus on sort of really three things for me, which are really sort of key, really critical components to, I think, growing a successful startup and a really successful business here in India. And I think it's actually applicable across the world, but particularly here, very much salient in this country, in India. And so I think it's really three things. And so for me, the first one of those is actually really understanding and asking the question, why? And so making sure that everyone in your organization is asking that question. So the second piece for me, which I think is extremely salient and very critical, is ensuring that everyone in the company, really from the top management to the middle layers, junior layers, entry-level guys, really understand and connect with the mission and the vision of the company. And so that doesn't always happen. And then finally, the third point is around empathy. And so I think that is something I'll touch on more, but empathy meaning actually connecting there with your fellow coworkers and as well as your customers. So three simple ideas. But the first one there, and I think really this is what is fundamentally underpinning the crux of everything that you do as a company, is that you need to make sure everyone in your company, whether it's your engineers, really especially your engineers, but your product guys, your operations guys, your marketing guys, your finance guys, all of these folks, all of these fellows have to be always asking the question, why? So why we're building something, why we're doing what we're doing, why is this strategy here, and why is it there, why are we spending this amount of money on marketing on this activity, on this event, this activation. And I think this really holds true whether you're doing a consumer-focused startup or whether it's a B2B startup. And I think that the challenge is, and I'll draw the correlate, if you're not asking those questions, if you're kind of going through the day and just sort of executing on sort of what we're doing and sort of how we're doing it, then I think fundamentally something gets lost because you really never take a step back to sort of internalize what it is that you're doing at a larger scale. And I think when you think about asking that question, why, what it does is it automatically provides context. And when you have context, that's something, especially when you're dealing with technical folks, when you have engineers, when you have product guys, that allows them to think really holistically about the end-to-end structure, the solutioning. It really opens up your eyes and your mind to think about what we're doing for the customer, how we're doing it in a way which is going to be sustainable and going to build, hopefully stickiness and excitement in your customers too. And I think what I've seen, and this is a lesson that we've taken in and we've learned from, it's when you actually start off and you're growing very, very quickly, everything tends to be sort of a race, right? You're like, okay, we got to bang out this new feature, we got to release this new product, and we have to launch in this market, launch in that market. And you're running sort of 1,000 miles an hour, and you're always just trying to get to that next milestone, next milestone. And so often, you get kind of worked up and you get really built up into that energy. And that's great, that's really important. But I think, so it just sometimes becomes sort of like an execution rut almost, where you're just constantly banging things out. And you're not taking a step back and having that perspective and that sort of medium-term, long-term view on sort of why you're building what you're building. And that's something where I think for us, the lesson, and we over the last year have certainly come up quite a bit. We've grown sort of 5x, 6x on many of those parameters. And it was something where I think it was a learning for me as well, where we had to kind of take a step back and say, whoa, we have to make sure that what we're doing is really in line always with the medium-term, the long-term vision. And that's something where even when it comes to smaller sort of everyday decisions, even if it comes to certain, say, HR policies, or whether it comes to something as simple as moving an office, or whether it's something like you're deciding if you're going to launch in a new market. So all of these things really have to take a step back and really drill down on a more structural level to really understand so why you're doing it. And I think the best piece for me in terms of that learning is when we came up and we scaled and grew over the last year from about 60, 70 people to around 160 plus people in that time frame. And when we started to, and actually I always see this because I go out, I'm always on the floor, like I actually don't have a desk at the office, so I just kind of stand all day. And with the guys and with some of our even like most junior engineers or most junior PMs, And I see them really engage and sort of drilling down and pushing back and asking those sort of fundamental questions about why they're building something, about what is the reasoning behind it. And that sort of questioning builds, I think, a lot more conviction and makes it incredibly that much more strong and that much more sustainable. So that's something which I would just leave you guys with, because that, for me, has been incredibly helpful. And now, sort of every day when I'm in the office, I'm just thinking, okay, well, how do I make sure that everyone is empowered to ask those questions, not be afraid to ask that question? And that means, okay, you're pushing back maybe sometimes on your boss. You know what? That's okay, because we want to have that. And I think that's something maybe you see in a lot of startups in the U.S. Or it's something that if you think, okay, maybe a startup in the U.S. and then you look at someone in like the Army, that's sort of the polar opposites. And obviously you want to be much closer to the former there. So the second point there that I mentioned earlier is really thinking about, now when you scale and when you grow, it becomes a lot harder. It's a lot easier actually early on to have people into the company that are really bought in fully to the mission and the vision. As a co-founder, and some of you guys are, I'm sure, entrepreneurs yourselves, but when you actually start off something, of course, you're incredibly passionate, you're really motivated, you want to build, and you can tell the world, okay, you're going to conquer the world and all of those things, and that's great. And that's really important, because to get your first co-founder, to get your first engineer, your first product guy, ops guy, that's all really critical. And to get those first 5, 6, 7, 10 guys, honestly, I think it's pretty easy. You don't even have to be a great salesman. You just have to kind of believe in what you're doing and just keep on speaking about it and motivating people and really inspiring people and convincing them. And that in the first 3 months, 6 months is usually not a huge challenge. I think what becomes really, really challenging, and this is where I think so many startups sort of forget, or they sort of lose touch with their roots. And that's what I was saying earlier, like when you're growing that quickly, it's so easy to kind of just get away from those sort of fundamentals. But when you're thinking about individuals, so when you go from 10 people to say 30 people to 50 people to 100, 200, 300 people, and this is something which I think you've seen kind of all over the world. It's not necessarily just India. Again, I mean, you've seen this in the US, you've seen this in Europe and China. You need to make sure that the people that you're hiring actually are cultural fits and actually believe in the vision and the actual sort of mission of the company, what you're doing. And I think for us, it's actually maybe a little bit easier than some companies, because what we're doing is fundamentally triple bottom line, right? So we're saying that we're going to do good for the environment, we're going to do good for society at large, and we're going to do good for the bottom line on the financial side as well. So I think that's something where our mission is very clear. I mean, it's like we're looking to actually reduce pollution, reduce emissions, reduce congestion in the cities by allowing people to take cars and use them as if they were their own, but use it in a collaborative fashion, in an on-demand fashion. And that's really very clean, very succinct, and something which all of our employees, I think, really buy into and are motivated by it, because they're actually building something which is highly, highly technologically advanced and sophisticated, has a very large operational component, but also has a very physical, on-ground, tangible thing that you can touch, and you say, look, we're actually putting out this network, we're building this. And that's something where, just as an illustration, an example, so we actually now have something that we call a day in the field. And this is something which it came actually from some inspiration from some others. I know Flipkart actually does something similar. I know Amazon does something similar in the US. But it was something we kind of course, put our unique spin on it, and something that I've been espousing for some time at the company, and you can ask some of our employees as well. But the idea here, the genesis of it, is really pretty easy. I mean, you want to take every single person that comes into the company, you make sure that every quarter they're going to our call center, which is here in Bangalore, and one of our sites, one of our pickup locations where we house our cars, where customers come in and out, where we actually deliver cars out of. So think of it as sort of like a logistics warehouse in some senses. So the idea there is fairly straightforward in that we want our employees, our entire employee base, we want them to really connect at a visceral level with their on-ground staff, with their customers, with that process. And so that's something where, fundamentally, that is, I think, so very important, because that's how they can kind of see and connect. Okay, I'm coding, I'm scripting, I'm doing this line of code here, I'm building out this product, I'm actually putting this marketing budget into Facebook, or I'm doing this event here and there. And that's all great, and that's really, really important. But so often you can get disconnected from what it is that you're actually building and what the customer is actually doing. And that's something where I think you really want to make sure that they have that feeling, they have that understanding. And so through this, what we've done is, we've been able to institutionalize an idea where, okay, it's not just about going there and kind of being a passive actor and soaking it in. No, you want to push guys, and you want to make sure they're giving feedback, they're engaging, they're having a two-way discussion flow, and you want to make sure that comes back and circles back into the overall dialogue at a company level and helps drive policy and helps drive product and that sort of implementation. Because then and only then do they really understand what that mission in the company is. And so I think it's really important that people, when you're actually even interviewing people, you always want to really understand, okay, why are they really actually joining you? And so do they actually get fundamentally that vision? And you have to reinstate it in other ways. So as aside from just doing a day in the field, it's really important that when you have your sort of company events and outings, that's something that you also have to bring up. And I think for us, just as an example on our side that I can share is that, so we recently had our 3-year anniversary in Bangalore, and that was something where to do that, to sort of celebrate that, instead of going out and sort of going and having a couple of drinks and a couple of laughs with the company, which is always important, which is always nice, but for us, we want to do something where it connects to the mission of the company and the vision of the company, which for us was connecting with our roots, so going to Malleshwaram where we started and being sort of really that sort of last mile, instead of the last mile delivery, sort of the last mile community building, so to speak. So we went and we actually did a Swachh Bharat thing where we actually went to one of the main parks in Malleshwaram, and we cleaned the park, we painted the park, we did a lot of sort of civic work there. And that was something, as we believe, and we're very genuine about that because we are really sort of community builders where we want to connect to everyone in the community, in the neighborhood, saying that, look, we're here for you. You don't actually have to go and waste your money and buy a car, own a car. We're giving you a resource which is almost like a public good in many ways. And I think that's something where people, sometimes when you're cooped up in an office all day, you can't really experience that when you can't connect with the people who are actually in the community. And I think that is something which is absolutely critically important. And we're always looking for new ways to actually bring home that message, drive home that vision. And that kind of comes into the last point just to talk about here, which is empathy. And so empathy, and this actually embodies the empathy side, at least on the customer angle, because again, when you're just in an office all day, and this is, okay, it's a little bit harder, I understand, for a B2B business if you're building maybe a SaaS business, but I think there's still ways, even in those businesses, that you can actually do that and you can achieve that piece. But it's really something where, in addition to actually going out, having a sort of a day in the field, that's one thing. But I think it's about also really kind of putting yourself in the customer's shoes, so walking around in them. And I think that's something where, of course, a lot of great books have talked about that. But I think it's something it's oftentimes easier said than done, and you really have to make sure as a company that you're sort of putting positions there which can actually institutionalize that sort of behavior and that sort of attitude. And I think for us, what really, really helps is that we will constantly have sort of organized sessions where our engineers, our product team, our operations teams, et cetera, who are here in Bangalore, can actually connect and speak often with the teams who are on the ground. And that's something, so whether they're the operations team, say in Hyderabad and Pune, et cetera, that really gives that, again, that sort of last mile connection where sometimes it's just not possible, of course, for all of our employees to go and speak to our lakhs of customers. I mean, that's just not going to work. It's not scalable. So there has to be another way. And so we have sort of institutionalized opportunities and casual, friendly opportunities for our guys in Bangalore in the corporate team to actually go and speak and engage and understand what are the real pain points. And so by doing that, by really understanding the pain points of the customers, so where is the process breaking? So is it for me, is there a step in the booking process, like when I have to, say, upload a driving license, which just becomes a real pain? Is it something where when I'm actually getting to my car, somehow am I getting lost somewhere along the way? Am I not finding it in the right place? So these are questions which that really ties to the empathy quotient, and you just can't get that unless you go and engage. And I think you have to be sort of fearless in terms of your engagement, both with your own employees who are on the ground, and then to the extent you can to customers. And another example, so we really always encourage and really insist that all of our employees constantly look at our social media pages, because I think as we all know today, social media, so Facebook for most companies in India is really just a glorified call center, which actually is sort of funny in many ways, but it's something where you see it becomes somewhat of a complaint forum, and you have to treat that with the right amount of care. And I think obviously you have to be extremely genuine, you have to be extremely responsive, and that's all there. But The point is not how you engage there on an operations standpoint. The point is that from an empathy quotient perspective, you need to make sure that all your employees, so I say even every one of my junior engineers would say, look, you have to go and you have to understand what customers are talking about us on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. Like, you have to see that. That is the true understanding of the customer experience. And if you don't know that, if you don't internalize that, then you're totally blind. And I think that is one thing which is actually really easy that everyone can do. And there are ways that I think little cultural ways where we actually look to build on this, whether it's certain internal competitions where we have sort of idea off, so to speak. I mean, you want to be thinking about how you can actually build that, improve that, make that a lot better. So I think that's sort of the empathy that you have there with the customer. Then to close off though, and to think about something which is actually maybe the most important piece really in any startup success, is because when you think about team dynamics and you think about building the teams and growing and scaling them in a super efficient way, you need to be working horizontally. I mean, if you're not working horizontally, then you should just give up, because it's something you can't have silos. You cannot have your engineering team disconnected from your marketing team, disconnected from your operations, your product team. They all have to be working in really tight lockstep. And that's something where you have to build the cross-team empathy. And you have to say, okay, there are problems that engineers face. What are they facing? Understand those problems and ask the questions. And so define that and really work to consistently drive and improve that. And that's something where, again, it's been a huge learning for us, because when we started off, it was something we were very small, and everyone's working kind of together. It's all sort of coagulated in a ball. But then over time, as you add more and more people to the teams, it has a natural way of kind of going apart. It's kind of like the Big Bang, right? It just kind of goes, and you don't know which way it's traveling. And so that's why it's really, really important that, again, both from an institutionalized perspective, if it's having these different processes that you set up just to make sure that teams are communicating. But I think it's more than that. You need to internalize it really on a sort of visceral level, to say that you show examples of the fact that when the teams come together, when you have like big products and when you launch new initiatives, and you have the marketing team there, you have the operations team, you have the product team, you have the technology team, that's the best way to do that and to build that cross-company, that cross-team empathy. Because really, it's about when they're sort of sitting in the weeds together, when they sort of understand each other's challenges and issues. And so much of it comes down to communication and sort of preempting things. And again, not being silent. When there's an issue, I think one thing that's great about startups, and one thing that we coach the guys on consistently, is that you have to be direct with people. I mean, do not keep things bottled up. Don't be passive. Don't be passive aggressive. You just have to go and say, look, if something's not working, it's not working. But you really have to really try to, when you're having those dialogues, it's really important to actually just, again, you're in the other, instead of the customer in this case, it's the other employee, the other team's shoes, and know what are their challenges, what are their constraints, what are they kind of operating under. And then by doing that, you can actually definitely, I think, solution in a much, much better place. And I think ultimately, when you tie these things in together, so the sort of the synergistic summary of all this is that when you tie in empathy, you tie in the company passion, mission, vision, and you tie in the questions around why, and asking those questions. It actually, the summation of that equation is actually the most important thing, I think, for any startup success, which is consistent customer experience excellence. And when you have all these three elements, you know that you're actually going to be delivering an otherworldly customer experience. And ultimately, at the end of the day, startups, they all have to make money, right? They all have to be successful on the financial side of things. And the most surefire way to do that is by taking those building blocks, right? And making sure that you have something where the customer experience for your product, your service, whether it's B2C, B2B, is so outrageously awesome that customers just want to keep coming back. And that's something which will ensure the health and vibrancy of your business over the long term. And I think as you scale, again, it's pretty easy to have a great customer experience when you start off and you have maybe 25, 30 employees and you have 2,000, 5,000 customers. But that is something which I would just leave you guys with, that always think about those three elements, and you're going to ensure that you're going to build a business that's sustainable, strong, and delivering an amazing customer experience. So thanks.